What you are about to see is a detailed report on a severe paragliding incident. If you are here just to watch the crash sequence, well, because you only want to see the crash sequence, I would still encourage you to watch the entire video, especially if you are a paragliding pilot yourself. This video focuses not only on what happened and how, but also on why it happened in the first place, and most importantly, what I learned from it. Maybe some of those lessons will be useful for your own flying too. You know, the incident lasts for seconds, the important part is everything around it. Before we jump into this XC story, two quick things. First of all, I was not injured. I ended up with just one tiny bruise on my arm that disappeared in a couple of days. Still, this video contains some moments that may feel uncomfortable to watch or make you a bit anxious. No screaming, no blood, no broken bones, but definitely some intense moments. I will show a timestamp you can safely skip to before we enter the sensitive part, so you can still watch all the summaries and lessons learned afterward. And the second thing, if you have any questions or want to share your thoughts with me or the paragliding community, feel free to join my Telegram group. We are almost 600 pilots from all over the world, and I reply there pretty quickly. You'll find the link in the description. Alright, let's get started. Please keep in mind that every statement or number I mention in this video was accurate at the day of the incident. By the time you are watching this, some things may already have changed. I want to structure this report similarly to how incidents are analyzed in aviation. So first we will talk about the pilot, the gear, the flying side and the weather conditions. I have 11 years of flying experience and more than 1600 hours of airtime. The vast majority of those hours are XC flying in thermal conditions, so almost no ridge or coastal soaring. Over the last 3 years I have flown roughly 250 to 300 hours a year, spread throughout the year without long breaks. So I'd say I was current and in good shape. During those same 3 years I also completed 3 SIV courses with some of Europe's best instructors, focusing mainly on stalls, spins and wing energy management, for example, controlling massive surges. The feedback I got was generally positive, good situational awareness, good understanding of what the wing was doing and solid control during dynamic maneuvers. So no major mistakes, no severe incidents during the SIV courses. I've been flying E&D wings since the end of 2023 and I had roughly 580 hours on E&D, 2 liners in all kinds of conditions, including 1 SIV course. I'd say I'm reasonably skilled at active piloting. Across my 1600 hours prior to this incident, I had only experienced 12 collapses, while countless deflations were prevented entirely or turned into non-events through my active control. 4 of those collapses on E&D 2-liners, and I handled 3 of them properly and 1 of them okay-ish. And just to clarify, I don't count this as a collapse. I count this as a collapse. You know, the kind that suddenly makes your life choices feel very interesting. Oh, and one more number. In all those 1600 hours, I had never thrown my reserve either. So this was both the most severe incident of my flying career and my first reserve deployment. Or rather, my first and my second. We'll get to that. Now, on the day of the incident I was fit both physically and mentally. No fatigue, no hangover, no background stress from work or family life. I always take off with 3 liters of water and drink regularly during the flights, so dehydration was not an issue. I also had snacks with me, so energy levels were fine as well. I wasn't under pressure or chasing ambitious goals, no pushing hard, no sacrificing safety margins for distance records. I mean, it was supposed to be just a normal XC flight, the kind I enjoy most. My wing is a high-performance E&D paraglider, the BGD Diva 2. At the time of the incident I had around 330 hours on this wing, including 1 SIV course. I always fly it loaded right at the top of the certified weight range, 99.9 kilos out of 100. Probably about 1 kilo less, because, well, the P-tube had already done its job a couple of times. My harness is the Advanced Impress 4, which I've flown for around 1400 hours. This exact wing and harness combination was also used during my SIV training. You see, this was a very familiar equipment to me, nothing new, nothing experimental. My wing had around 120 hours since its last inspection and trim check, which was done by a professional I trust a lot. My reserves had been repacked 5 months earlier by a professional packer. I often repack them myself, but sometimes it's easier to let the professionals do their thing. The rest of the gear isn't really relevant for this case. This incident happened in Bassano del Grappa. Well, not exactly Bassano. I was near the western turn point of the classic 100-kilometer triangle, close to Monte Cagliano, so technically the nearest flying site would be Monte Novenio. In any case, I know this area extremely well. I've flown in Bassano more than 180 times, and I've probably passed through the exact incident area at least 40 times before. Some of you may even have seen my video explaining how to fly Il Classico di Bassano, the 120-kilometer triangle. So yes, I was very familiar with both the terrain and the general conditions there. Why does any of this matter? Well, because it shaped my expectations going into that flight. I believed I was ready for whatever Bassano could throw at me. One small detail though, I had never previously flown so high in this particular spot. Probably not critical, but worth noting. The forecast promised good thermal conditions with a bit of easterly wind. In the western part of the area, forecasts showed some light to moderate northerly wind in the upper layers. It was expected to weaken later and transition into the usual westerly flow during the afternoon. Basically, pretty typical XC weather for Bassano. The actual conditions turned out to be somewhat different. We experienced noticeably stronger easterly wind, and the higher you climbed, the stronger it became. In general, the air was moderately turbulent and required active piloting throughout the flight. Some thermals were rougher than others, but still manageable. The western part, especially around Monte Sumano, felt worse though. I had never experienced air that unpleasant at Monte Sumano before. The thermals were turbulent, gusty, and required constant active piloting, especially at higher altitudes. I would describe the conditions there as challenging. Looking back, this was probably the first moment I should have started seriously reconsidering whether to keep going west. At the time, I didn't. I will come back to that decision later. Looking at my recorded flight track near the incident area, you can clearly see how much this strong thermal was drifting. You can also notice that at approximately 2200 meters, my drift direction shifted from pure east-southeast to northeast, which suggests the wind may have changed abruptly at this layer, probably creating wind shear. Later, a local pilot who knows the area very well confirmed my suspicion that this zone was likely being hit by a northerly wind at that time. So here I am, climbing in this moderately turbulent thermal over Monte Cagliano. We are approaching the sensitive part of the story now, so if you'd rather skip it, jump to this timestamp. As you can see, I'm very high above the terrain. Then, seemingly completely out of nowhere, my wing suffered a massive frontal collapse. I call it a frontal because you can clearly see that it started from the center section. I reacted with brake input, but probably too late and not deep enough. I was completely surprised by the collapse. I mean, I simply wasn't ahead of the wing mentally anymore, so not to make things worse, I put my hands up, waiting to see what the wing would do next. The wing surged violently and asymmetrically, and I didn't catch the surge properly. I got twisted, and the wing developed a huge cravat. For a brief moment I managed to stabilize my wing in that configuration, but then I stalled the remaining flying portion while trying to keep the glider from entering an auto-rotation. Finally, I completely lost control. It led to a 7-turn twist with my brakes locked. The wing then entered a moderate backfly rotation. I tried to to untwist myself using the rotation. No luck. I kept checking my altitude, and once I realized I had run out of time to keep experimenting, I threw my first reserve. Probably because of the relatively low sink rate and lack of line tension, the reserve failed to inflate properly and just started floating around. I immediately decided to throw the second reserve rather than waste time trying to fix the first one. As you can see, the second reserve also hesitated initially. Meanwhile, me and my camera got tangled up in the first reserve, so the exact moment the second one finally opened isn't visible in the footage. And because apparently the universe felt the situation still wasn't complicated enough, the lines of the wing reserves and my harness somehow got tangled up and flipped me upside down. At that point, I could no longer change my position during the descent and couldn't disable my wing. The first reserve never opened. At some point, both the wing and reserve got caught in trees, which brought me to a soft stop about 50 centimeters above a small ledge, with steep cliffs above and below it. Securing myself to a tree with the safety sling wasn't really optional at this point, so I did that, before calling rescue services. Fortunately, I had cell coverage and surprisingly good internet up there. Initially, I lost radio contact with my flying buddy, who was still nearby. He top-landed not far away and, together with some locals, helped coordinate the rescue. I was eventually evacuated by helicopter and brought down into the valley with my gear. Two pilots from my Telegram group even helped me get back from the rescue area all the way to my car in Bassano. I'd like to thank everyone who helped me and everyone who reached out asking whether I was okay. I really appreciate it. After the incident, I wrote a detailed, multi-page report for myself to fully understand what had happened. This video is based on it. My conclusion: the primary cause was severe and unexpected turbulence that suddenly put me mentally behind my aircraft. Instead of anticipating what my wing was about to do, I was chasing what it had already done. That led to poorly timed, incorrect control inputs and ultimately a total loss of control. On top of that, I identified several contributing factors. Number 1. My insufficient SIV practice for this class of wing. I had only completed one SIV course on high-performance END wings, despite having almost 600 hours on them. For me personally, that simply wasn't enough. Number 2. Flying a demanding high-performance wing that requires extremely precise and well-timed reactions during major collapses. I wouldn't call this the root cause, since unexpected collapses and violent reactions are actually possible with any wing, but it definitely contributed. A more forgiving wing might have given me more time and a better margin for error, particularly in this situation. Number 3. My decision to continue the flight, despite already disliking the conditions. About 30 minutes before the incident around Monte Sumano, I was already thinking, wow, this air here is really rowdy. Maybe it will get even worse further west. Part of me wanted to turn around and head back toward takeoff, but I ignored that gut feeling and continued anyway. And finally, number 4, the air mass itself. Strong winds, probable wind shear in the upper layers, and unusually gusty, turbulent conditions in this whole area at that time. My wing suffered a few small holes. It was repaired and then professionally inspected afterward. The trim was still okay, only the wingtips measured around 5 to 6 mm slower than factory trim, which is well inside tolerance and almost certainly unrelated to the collapse itself. At most, it may have slightly increased stall tendency, but honestly, probably not in any meaningful way. Despite all the mistakes and failures, there are also a few things I think I handled well. I continuously monitored my remaining altitude while trying to resolve the situation. I didn't hesitate to throw the reserve once it became necessary, and when the first one failed to inflate, I immediately threw the second instead of troubleshooting. I also had a safety sling, stayed relatively calm and secured myself before making rescue calls. So, what did I actually learn from all this, and what can you take away from this video? Well, doing some SIV training and even performing quite well there doesn't guarantee anything. Neither does having lots of airtime, familiar equipment, or flying in familiar terrain. I wasn't overconfident, but this incident showed me there's still a big gap between training performance and real-world reactions under extreme surprise. The whole event escalated so violently and so quickly that I simply stopped reacting the way I normally would. Watching the recorded footage afterward was honestly painful. I can see every single mistake, frame by frame, and I keep asking myself, why? Why are you doing that? Training absolutely helps, no question about it, but when things hit really hard and really fast, reality can look very different. I have handled big collapses before and I performed much better, but not this time. Another lesson is having two reserves is absolutely worth it. That said, the incident also raised some questions for me about how the reserves behave in unusual configurations. Throwing from a moderate backfly rotation may actually be even worse than deploying from a normal auto-rotation. If you have any thoughts about that, let me know. Looking back, I think my reserve system didn't work particularly well in this scenario. Maybe I should have taken one extra second to better assess the exact configuration before deploying. And yes, I will definitely pay more attention to gut feelings from now on. I fly because I enjoy it, nobody forces me to be there. So if the air feels terrible and my instincts are screaming, "This is dumb," maybe it's okay to listen. And then there's the question many of you will probably ask, will I keep flying my hot ship? Honestly, even before this incident, I had already been thinking about my wing choice, and actually several times. I also spoke to friends about it. This event gave me a pretty strong reason to revisit that question. So yes, I'm fairly sure I will step back to a less demanding wing. And you know what? I feel completely fine about that decision. No shame, no drama. Now, if I had to create a short list of things I personally want to remember from this flight, it would be these 5 points. Surprise can degrade your reactions far more than experience suggests. One SIV course in 600 hours on a high-performance wing is not enough. Conditions can become very challenging even in places you know well. Gut feelings about air quality deserve more weight. Two reserves are worth the wait, but even two reserves are not a guarantee. Every aviation incident report ends with a long list of recommendations. I'm just a teabag pilot, not an aviation authority, so I'm not going to pretend I'm here to issue recommendations. You are free to draw your own conclusions from this video and from everything I've talked about. Leave a comment below. You don't have to explain exactly what I should have done differently to handle the collapse or avoid the stall. Trust me, I know. What I would really love to hear instead is feedback about this report itself. What was useful? What was missing? Was this kind of analysis helpful at all? Share your thoughts here, or even better, join the discussion in my Telegram group. Okay, but wait, I actually can give you one recommendation after all. My usual one. Fly safe and see you in the next story.